Picture this: a boy no older than 14 stands trembling beneath a veil of pearls. His skin is pale from powdered chalk, his lips painted to resemble a woman long dead. Before him, Emperor Nero holds out a wedding ring with trembling hands, eyes glistening with tears, not of joy, but madness. This isn't love, this is grief weaponized. And what follows is one of the most disturbing love stories in history. They say Rome burned while Nero played the lyre. But there are worse songs than fire, quieter, more surgical, and far more cruel. Songs that echo not in flames, but in flesh. In the year of sorrow, when Rome still smoldered with guilt and ash, Emperor Nero walked the palace gardens alone, speaking aloud to no one. The truth was, Poppaea was dead. His wife, his pearl, his obsession. Some said it was fever. Others said he kicked her. No one said it twice. He wept for her in public. He tore his robes. But mourning in Nero's world was not just grief. It was appetite. And grief, like love, demanded a shape. And so, when a boy named Sporus was brought before him delicate, smooth-skinned, with eyes like poured resin, Nero did not see a child. He saw a vessel, a possibility, a canvas upon which his sorrow could be Sporus was no one of consequence. A slave boy, likely born of another slave. His name, if it was ever his, meant seed a cruel irony. Considering what came next, the palace physician refused at first. The child was too young, but the emperor's will was not a question. A boy's scream was just another note in Rome's opera, and so the knives were cleaned, and the chamber was prepared. Sporus did not remember his real mother, but he would forever remember the sound of that room. The scrape of steel on bronze, the rustle of robes, the flicker of fire reflected in polished marble as the blade did its silent work, a wound that would never heal. When he awoke, Nero gave him a dress. Some say it was Poppaea's, others, a replica made finer, jewels sewn at the collar, a veil of pearls. He was led to the imperial dining hall, where senators whispered and slaves lowered their eyes. Nero stood waiting. He called Sporus, his bride. He gave the boy a new name, Sabina. He held his hand and whispered that the gods had returned what they took. And when Sporus trembled, Nero smiled. They were married in a private ceremony, attended by ghosts. Nero placed a ring upon the boy's finger. He kissed him before a statue of Venus. He wept again, this time not for the wife he had lost, but for the illusion he had constructed with the ruin of another soul. Sporus would be paraded beside him in public, draped in purple silk, painted lips trembling under Rome's sun. Some laughed, some pitied, but none dared intervene. And in the quiet hours of the night, when the marble halls echoed only with candlelight and memory, the emperor would rest his head on the child's chest and ask, "Do you forgive me?" And Sporus, taught never to lie, never to speak at all, only nodded. There were no words for what Sporus had become. Not boy, not wife, not man, not ghost. He was a shadow sewn into silk, a living effigy to a woman whose absence bled through the walls of the palace like mold. The people whispered. Of course, Rome's appetite for scandal rivaled its appetite for blood. They called Sporus Nero's phantom bride. They mocked the emperor's madness behind closed doors and copied his cruelty at parties, where other boys were dressed and degraded in jest. But Nero did not laugh. He believed. Or rather, he needed to believe. His empire was rotting from within, senators conspiring, generals grumbling, gods falling silent. But Sabina, soft-eyed and silent, made the lie livable. He took Sporus to Greece, where he performed on stage like a cursed demigod singing tragedies, while his consort watched from the wings, wrapped in layers of white. The Greeks, too refined to speak openly, applauded. The sea, unmoved, crashed against Nero's delusion. And Sporus he endured, because what else could he do? The child who bled on marble now wore perfume and pearls, and no one, not even the gods, seemed inclined to rescue him. Each night, Nero would hold him and whisper stories of Poppaea, of what she had said, what she had worn, what she had screamed, until Sporus knew her better than he knew himself. He grew older, his voice never deepened, his shoulders never widened, the wounds beneath the silk never truly closed. Then Rome turned. The Senate declared Nero a public enemy. The palace guards disappeared. The Praetorians pledged themselves elsewhere. Nero fled with a handful of slaves and Sporus at his side. In a crumbling villa outside the city, the man who had ruled the known world found himself alone and afraid. He asked Sporus to prepare the dagger, but the boy could not, or would not, and so a servant helped Nero press the blade into his throat. just as the soldiers arrived. History would say his final words were, "What an artist dies in me." But Sporus would remember something else. "I'm sorry," Nero whispered, eyes wide, voice trembling like a leaf in wind. "Tell her I tried." He died in a pool of his own grandeur, blood soaking into stolen silks. Sporus wept not for the man, but for the echo of himself now Rome did not care for orphans of power. After Nero's death, Sporus was passed like property. First to Nymphidius Sabinus, a Praetorian commander who also took him as bride. Then to Uther, who was briefly emperor, who had once loved Poppaea himself. Each man, in his own twisted way, sought to possess what Nero had tried to recreate. Sporus became a mirror held up to reflect what others most feared or most longed for, and each time, the mirror cracked a little more. There are no surviving portraits of him, no statues, just fragments mentioned in scrolls, jests in satirical plays, cruel etchings in bathhouse walls. But some say he wore black in those final years. No more pearls, no more perfume, just silence. He carried himself with grace still, but no longer looked anyone in the eye. One winter evening, as new fires kindled across Rome under a new emperor's rule, Sporus vanished. Some say he fled to the provinces, others claim he lived among actors in exile. But the most persistent story, the one whispered by scribes and half-drunk senators, was that he took his own life. They say he slit his veins in a bathhouse, not in despair, but defiance. That he placed a veil over his face and spoke no final word. And in that moment, Sabina died again. But in truth, she had died many times before, with each lie spoken through a clenched jaw, with each hand that touched without asking. With each night her silence was mistaken for consent. The tragedy of Sporus was not just what was done to him, it was that the world remembered Nero, but not the boy he destroyed. Even now, history treats him as a curiosity, a footnote, a whisper. But listen closely, and you can still hear him, not in words, but in the silence that follows cruelty, in the echo of a name stolen, in the rustle of silk on stone. He was a child, a bride, a wound that walked, and though he died unnamed, Rome never forgot his shape.